Welcome class to your first flipped classroom video. Thank you for joining me. Now before we begin, there are a couple things I want to go over on how to appropriately watch these videos to get the most out of them. Most importantly, let's talk about the resources you should have in front of you when you're watching my videos. First of all, make sure you have your packet out to the right page. If you don't have your packet out, it means you're not probably going to be able to take the notes, which is the point of watching these videos. So make sure you have your packet out and ready. Not only that, please make sure you have something to write with as well. And finally, make sure you have your calculator. Watching me do it on the board is one thing, but I want you following along. Make sure when I give you calculator techniques, you're trying them out to make sure you can use your calculator too. Don't just take the notes. Make sure you are following along, actually typing in the problems yourself as well. So today's lesson is 7.1, 0 and negative exponents. Chapter 7 is all about exponents. So before we dive in too deep, I'm going to take a little bit of time to review some of the basics with you. So if you look at our first kind of review problem, evaluate each of these. So 8 squared. This is something I don't even think most of you would need your calculator for. 8 squared, you know, represents 8 times 8. That's what the squared means. So most of you can pretty easily tell me that that is 64. Now, something you also may recall from last year is that I can give you a variable expression. So here, I can give you x squared. And I can ask you to evaluate that when x is negative 3. Now, the piece of advice I have for this whenever you are evaluating something, especially when you're using your calculator, my little note to you is use parentheses. I cannot emphasize that enough. What I mean by use parentheses, if you're typing this into your calculator, you're plugging in negative 3 for x. So around that negative 3 that you're plugging in, I want you to use parentheses, okay? So when you do that, if you type that in, negative 3 times negative 3, that's what negative 3 squared means. Your calculator should give you 9. Now, if you're having a difficult time remembering how do I square things, how do I use these exponents on my calculator, what you're really looking for, what you're going to type in, is going to be negative 3, that caret button, 2, all right? So if you need help remembering how to even type these in, exponents, what you're looking for is that caret button right there, okay? That's what you need to be using. And again, what you should be getting is 9. So let's look at our next one. Negative x to the 4. So again, I want you to use parentheses only around the number you are plugging in. So what this means, you have a negative already as part of your problem, all right? Now what are you plugging in? Well, you're plugging in that negative 2. So now for x, I'm putting that negative 2, this time to the 4th power. So make sure you are typing this in correctly to your calculator, okay? Now, just to help you process this out, if you have negative 2 to the 4th power, again, to an even power, I'm hoping you remember, that should make it a positive number. So you have negative 2 to the 4th power. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So that'll give you positive 16. Now, the catch here is you already had a negative sitting on the outside. So that negative is actually going to make your answer a negative 16. So what I just talked you through, your calculator should just pop that out for you. If you type it in exactly as I've shown you, that is the answer your calculator should give you, negative 16. Now, that's a little review of stuff that I'm hoping you already know. Now, for the new stuff, we're going to be talking about the 0 exponent and negative exponent, okay? So, we're going to fill in this chart together of 2's and 10's. Now, we've already talked about 2 to the 4. 2 to the 4th power, you should be getting 16. 2 cubed, 2 times 2 times 2 should give you 8. 2 squared should give you 4. 2 to the 1st, if you recall anything to the 1st power, you just get back whatever you started with. So 2 to the 1st gives you 2. Now, this is where you should start typing it into your calculator because you may not know the rest of this table. 2 to the 0 power. If you type that into your calculator, you get a little bit of a strange answer, okay? Something you're probably not expecting. Your calculator will tell you 1, all right? Again, a little unexpected. We'll come back to that. Now, 2 to the negative 1 power. If you type that into your calculator properly, 2 to the negative 1, your calculator will give you 0.5. Again, maybe a little bit strange to think about that. 0.5. Now, for the sake of this lesson, I want us to think of 0.5. I want us to consider that as 1/2. Okay? 2 to the negative 2 power. What your calculator is going to give you is 0.25. Now again, for the sake of this lesson, I want you to think of that as 1/4. 2 to the negative 3. That is going to give you 0.125. And again, for the sake of this lesson, let's think of it as a fraction. That is actually 1/8. And 2 to the negative 4. That is going to give you 0.0625. And again, for this lesson though, that is 1/16. If you don't know how to turn something into a fraction using your calculator, that's something I will show you in class to make sure that you're aware on how to do that. So, there is our table for that. Now, for the tens, I want you to try that out on your own, okay? I want you to fill out this tens table, so I'm not taking too much time in this video, but I want you to pause it, take a second, actually fill that out for yourself, okay? I'm not going to take the time to go through that one because I want to make sure you can fill in this table. What I am more interested in is these thoughts, okay? So, after you filled in that table, I want you to then continue watching the video. So what do you think any non-zero base to the 0 power would be? All right, so 2 to the 0, you got 1. 10 to the 0, after filling that in, you also should have gotten 1. So what I want you to walk away from this table showing is that anything to the 0 power, absolutely anything, is actually just going to give you 1, okay? Now, I'm not going to take time to explain that in the video. I'll take a little bit of time to explain that in class to you to show you why that is. But this is going to be one of our main rules, anything to the 0 power being 1. So, what is the relationship that you see between positive powers and negative powers? So for that, what I want you to consider is, here is to the first and to the negative 1. 2 versus 1/2. To the second power, to the negative 2 power. You got 4 and 1/4. To the third power, you got 8. To the negative 3 power, you got 1/8. So for that, I'm hoping that you're recognizing the pattern that when you take something to a negative exponent, all it does is sends it to the denominator, okay? So, 2 to the 3 gives you 8. Well, that means 2 to the negative 3. Oh, that 8's now on the bottom of my fraction. That gives me 1/8. And now, finally, another food for thought. Do you think it's possible to get a negative result when you raise a base to a power? So that, I want you to look at this row for me up here, okay? No matter what we did, we had positive exponents, we had 0 exponents, we had negative exponents. But I want you to notice, our solutions were always positive, okay? So taking a positive number to any exponent, I want you to realize it will never, ever be negative, okay? You will never get a negative solution by doing that. All right, moving right along. So, we've already discussed this a little bit. Anything to the 0 power, I want you to fill in, that is going to be 1. Then anything to a negative power is going to send it to the denominator. Okay, so let's get a little bit of practice applying these skills that we just talked about. So, number 10, negative 4.25 to the 0 power. Now for this, you could just type it into your calculator, but what I want you to do is actually think about it. Think about the rule we just discussed. Something to the 0 power. That should just give us 1. Right, negative 5 to the negative 2 power. So again, I want you to consider, you can type this into your calculator, but what I also want you to realize is what's going on here. So that negative 2 power, what that is telling me is that is going to drag that 5 squared down to the bottom, all right? So we'll have a 1 on top. Now notice, we had a negative out front. So this is going to stay a negative value because we started with it being negative, all right? Then 5 squared, to simplify this up a little bit further, 5 squared gives us 25. Now again, when it's written out for you like this, if there's no parentheses shown, you don't really need parentheses when you type it into the calculator. 2 to the negative 6. So 2 to the negative 6. Well again, that's going to be our negative exponent rule. So it's going to take it down to the denominator. So this is going to flip down and be 2 to the 6 in the denominator. Now, you probably don't know 2 to the 6 off the top of your head. So 2 to the 6, type it in. That is 64. So you get 1 over 64. And again, try it both ways. Try processing through it and try using your calculator. Try both, okay? So 16, we have negative 12 to the negative 1 power. Again, I see a negative exponent. So that is going to take that 12 down to the denominator, 12 to the first power. We're going to put a 1 on top, and the original number was negative. We had a negative out front, so that negative is going to stay with us. To write this as simplified as possible, I want you to notice 12 to the first power. Well, we know taking something to the first power actually just leaves it alone. So we could more simplify write this just as negative 1 over 12. All right, 58 to the negative 1. So again, I see that negative exponent. I know I'm going to be moving it down to the denominator. So I'm going to have 58 to the first power down to the denominator. I'm going to put a 1 on top. Again, just like we finished discussing, anything to the first power is just that number. So we get 1 over 58. All right. Looking at our next one. Negative 5 to the negative 3. All right, so looking at that one. So that negative 3, that's going to take that whole thing down to the denominator. So negative 5 to the third power. We have a 1 there. So now we need to figure out negative 5 to the third power, okay? So when you type that into your calculator, this time they even showed you parentheses, so make sure you are using parentheses when you put it into the calculator, all right? So, negative 5 to the third power, that gives you negative 125. All right, so I think I'm going to stop there for this video. So what we're going to do is keep these videos short. What I'll do sometimes is finish the notes the next day in class to start off. So this is going to be the end of this video. So thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to having you watch my next video, and I'll see you in class.